Hello, this is Mario Nafal's 69X Minutes. I'm Erin Molan. It's great to have your company. Yes, we're back, bigger and better than ever. You know the deal by now. The biggest headlines, actual real investigations, and the kind of stories straight from the ex-trenches you won't find anywhere else. We've got world leaders, whistleblowers, everyday exes like you. We've got it all. It's real news, it's real fast, so let's get into it. Tonight on 69X Minutes, Eric Bolling goes inside a high-stakes ICE raid targeting a violent gang. 2 suspects caught, 1 accused of murder. We get an exclusive sneak peek at on-the-ground disaster protocol. Real people training for when disaster strikes and the system fails. Mary Kutter's powerful new song takes aim at the opioid crisis and the communities tragically left behind. Live from CPAC, Hungary, Mario sits down with Balázs Orbán. Plus, of course, my take. This is 69X Minutes. When disaster hits in America, there's no guarantee someone's coming to save you. No magic button. Just sirens, chaos, and the people who are already on the ground. In this 69X Minutes sneak peek, we take you deep into the Tennessee backwoods, where a group of veterans, medics and volunteers are running live disaster drills with one goal: save lives when no one else can. They've built their own network, their own team, their own plan. No funding, no spotlight, no government help. Just faith, grit and a mission. This isn't prepping for fun. It's training for the day the system fails. Here's your first look at on-the-ground disaster protocol.
We're down here in West Tennessee. Several response organizations, Christian Rangers, Freedom Rangers, Operation America, doing some training, and we have created a scenario where we have a lost family who has just been struck by an earthquake.
Team 1, Team 2, you got a copy? Team 1, Team 2, you got a copy? Over.
It's important for this training to go on for people within the communities of Tennessee and the surrounding area to be ready to go to help their neighbors out when disaster strikes.
Amen.
I'm Xavier, and I with Christian Raiders training for the earthquake.
Put a tourniquet on.
When you're bleeding really bad.
When you have a major bleed. How long do you have to put it on?
20.
How long? Until you pass out, right? So you got to put it on really
Tight.
Ah, damn it, it works.
These are nice job.
Or how much is the price points on that? Go, Bobby, go, Bobby, go. Spin the dial, spin the dial. There you go.
I don't know how to walk
Just
away.
keep going in a circle. There you go.
Disaster HQ will conduct a key leader engagement. We learned how to do that in the morning, right? We're going to talk to this person. It's a local pastor of the community, right? So we just had an earthquake 2 days ago. The hit time to be there is going to be, let's say 16:15. Get a little bit of time to plan and do a train mall in the vicinity of this grid. So go ahead and plug that in on your phones to gain information on locations to local earthquake survivors.
How's everybody doing out here?
I heard it was a Category 4 earthquake. Are you okay?
I'm okay. My church is scattered. Not much left of the church. We'll have to rebuild.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's something that we also do.
Yeah.
Where you need any help,
Yeah.
we could definitely help you rebuild and stuff. Well, we just want to make sure that everyone in the area is okay. Since we heard over the news there's a Category 4 earthquake.
And so we're coming together, we're doing some training, and which has led us to a lake down here where we have created a scenario where we have a lost family who has just been struck by an earthquake, and they've been in the woods for a couple of days, and so now they're stranded.
We need to know where the survivors are, where they're going to, because the safe site right now, the local EMA and the Red Cross is over in Dover. So we need to try to get these people over to Dover so they can get care.
All right. Then you understand about the terrain board?
Third key task is going to be once you establish link up and communicate with that key leader, I want a full case plan sent over to headquarters here, working through our existing case plan. So bow things, rapid radio, mesh tastic, and Starlink. I'll give you the mobile Starlink. That way you can make a shot to me back here. And I want you, even though one might work, I want you to go through all four and see what works, what doesn't work, if it's out of range, or whatever, go through that process.
It's moving across the coastline, coming back towards our course. So whenever you get ice.
And so now that team used a drone to go and find the people first.
Hello, search and rescue.
And then they walked the drone, and through their map reconnaissance was able to go find that team. There was some scenario stuff there on the actions on the objective. All right, 1-0. 5, 4, 3, 2. Regina is on the shoreline. All right. All right. Patient is up safe.
You all right, man?
There it is. Forsaken scenario. Captain, we've got to assess you.
God bless you.
Anybody know your name? You know what year it is? What happened over there?
Hurricane, I think.
And then after that, they were able to exfil that team safely and get them onto their humanitarian corridor, which is down in Dover.
If you think about it, like our composition is divine, right? It says it in the Bible. So I think our makeup is that divinity, which we may not be able to see, right? But you see it in like the pattern of your life and your interactions with God and other people and love and faith, right? And that natural inclination to seek and find God.
Relating to being created in the image of God. So like God, we possess a spirit or a soul which allows us to have a relationship with God.
So this is the type of things that we go through when we're training, we're preparing, we're trying to get ourselves ready. So when the Lord calls during that disaster, we can say, "Here I am, Lord, send me."
It began with a single study, 12 children, 1 doctor, and a claim that would ignite a global firestorm, linking the MMR vaccine to autism. But what the public didn't see was what was happening behind the scenes. Secret funding from lawyers preparing lawsuits, a patent for a competing vaccine, and millions on the table if public trust collapsed. That study has since been fully retracted, but the damage, well, it's still spreading. Outbreaks, panic, distrust, and an anti-vaccine movement that now spans continents. Dr. Liza Lockwood is an emergency physician and medical toxicologist who spent her career fighting misinformation and treating the real-world fallout. She does it firsthand. Today, she walks us through the facts behind the story, the system that allowed it to spiral, and the lessons we still haven't learned. This isn't just about one paper, one doctor, or one lie. It's about how entire systems can fail and who pays the price when they do.
I think that vaccines are one of the most important inventions of, well, the early vaccines came before the 20th century. The smallpox vaccine came before then. But for the most part, the 20th century is when we got a number of vaccines approved, and they are really critical for public health. Now, so there's always been sort of this underlying concern about vaccines in groups of people who haven't seen the impacts of these infectious diseases. I mean, it started out in a relatively small group of people. That was amplified in 1998 when a man by the name of Andrew Wakefield, who was a gastroenterologist or a GI doctor, was doing research in England. And he wrote a paper that was published in a top-tier medical journal called The Lancet that made the claim that in 12 children, he had found an association between the administration of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the MMR, and the development of inflamed colons and autism. And so that really sparked a lot of angst in people about the safety of the MMR vaccine. What he failed to tell anybody, and which was discovered over the next several years, was that he had been hired by attorneys who wanted to sue pharmaceutical companies that were making vaccines. And they had, and this is all done under incredible investigative reporting by a journalist by the name of Brian Deer. And he reported these findings in the British Medical Journal. So he had done, he'd been hired by attorneys. The attorneys had paid for his initial testing protocols, so £50,000. And they had paid him over £430,000 in the ensuing 2 years to start working on this trial. He also failed to mention that he had patented his own vaccines to replace the MMR. And then he thought that he was going to make $43 million a year in litigation-driven testing. So he was going to develop a blood test or a urine test where he could test for trace amounts of residuals that are left by, in his mind, left by as evidence of vaccination. And so Brian Deer discovered this over the next 6 years. So the article was published in 1998. Brian Deer had his investigative journalism piece finished and went to Richard Horton. Richard Horton is the editor of The Lancet. He's the editor-in-chief. And said, I'm very concerned about this. Vaccines save lives. Kids are getting sick and actually dying from measles now because of this report. This really is a marked conflict of interest. And don't you think that given this conflict of interest, we should be retracting this paper? Richard Horton's response at the time was something along the lines of, personally, I regret the article, this impact the article has had. Professionally, I don't. And The Lancet needs to raise new ideas. He didn't retract the article at that time, even though 10 of the other authors, when they realized what had gone into this, decided to take their names off the article. Brian Deer was astonished that this level of conflict didn't seem to be a big enough problem to retract a paper that was having a huge public health impact. And so he continued his investigation and discovered that these children had all undergone blood tests, spinal taps, imaging, colonoscopies. And these studies were later, when they were reviewing the papers or the records of these patients, they realized that not only was it all fabricated, but none of these studies were really indicated. So these children had been kind of like guinea pigs. In 2010, the paper was ultimately retracted, but by that time the damage was done. Andrew Wakefield's study caused so much consternation that there were multiple studies done with literally thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of children, that showed that there was no association between the MMR vaccine and autism at all. This was fraud. And that is really devastating. It's really heartbreaking that this story wound up capturing the minds of so many people who think that Andrew Wakefield is some hero when really he was in it for money. And I think that side of the story doesn't ever get told. And it has very much undermined one of the pillars of public health. And it's a tragedy because there are lots of needless deaths because of it. In 2000, in the United States, measles had been declared eradicated. And in England and Ireland, you started seeing measles cases start rising again. And pediatricians and doctors were beside themselves because of this article. But after Brian Deere went to Richard Horton, who was the editor-in-chief, in 2004, and the article wasn't fully retracted, it stayed live all the way until 2010, when they found that all of the medical records had been fabricated. The reports of the medical records were intact, but when they went over the medical records and the testing that they'd done, they saw no inflamed colons. They saw, they saw fabrication of what the patients had said. The patients were often said to have developed this syndrome, this autism-like syndrome, 2 weeks after the MMR, when in fact many of them had symptoms and had a kind of working diagnosis of a developmental delay prior to the MMR. Dr. Wakefield then wound up getting his license stripped. He can't practice medicine in England anymore. And then came to the United States and set up a program in Texas, and he goes around the United States touring with people, talking about how vaccines are associated with autism, even though he patented his own vaccine. And everywhere he goes, a measles outbreak follows.
Britney Spears continues to spark concern with a series of bizarre Instagram videos. The singer has sparked speculation about her health for the last few months after posting repetitive videos spinning around in circles and drinking alcohol as fans grow concerned over her well-being. It comes as the singer was told off by airport authorities on a private jet from Cabo San Lucas to Los Angeles, where she lit up a cigarette on board. She was told off, she complied, but she was branded difficult by staff on board the aircraft, according to TMZ. She also took to Instagram to apologize for the smoking incident and blamed it on vodka and drinking vodka for the first time. Fans have grown concerned over the singer's behavior recently as she posts continued videos on Instagram where she spins in circles frantically and appearing erratic. Fans are also now questioning whether or not Britney Spears was better off under the controversial conservatorship that ended in 2021. This is Ollie London, and that was your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Country music has long been the voice of the heartland, but this track cuts deeper than the common theme of heartbreak. It's a war cry against America's deadliest epidemic. Mary Cutter's debut single, The Devil Wore a Lab Coat, isn't just a song. It's a raw, fierce indictment of the opioid crisis, a battle cry for towns crushed by addiction and the greed that's fueled it. Her voice carries the pain, the betrayal, and the desperate hope of the communities left behind. This isn't country music gloss, it's truth in a melody. Mary joins us now to share the story behind the track and the urgent message she's sending straight from the heartland.
Now this new song, The Devil Wore a Lab Coat. You talk about like people in your community going from painkillers to funerals, and you call out doctors and Big Pharma and the system itself, and what you're saying is something that a lot of people really think but aren't allowed to say. And if you recall, remember that song Richmond North of Richmond? You said something we were all thinking, and all of a sudden overnight it took off. Elon Musk created a real free speech platform where a few years ago we couldn't even question a vaccine. We couldn't question doctors. We couldn't question Big Pharma because you'd be labeled a conspiracy theorist or an alt-right rat or whatever they wanted to call you. Right. And then they would ban your account and you weren't allowed to ask questions. People are just now starting to realize that we can ask questions again. We can question our medical community, which I think is vital because exactly like you talk about in this song, people are dying from the medicine.
I'll tell you, It was a little bit scary, David. Right after I posted it, I got on TikTok one Saturday morning. I guess it was the Saturday after I posted it. And I had this message that TikTok had sent to me that they had taken down the video for misinformation. And my account was being put into, I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but essentially a little prison. Essentially, I was in trouble. And if I did anything else against their guidelines, I would lose my account. And I thought, holy guacamole with a side of salsa, that's a pretty big deal for someone who, does music for a living and posts every day. And of course, everything we wrote in that song has been proven by court. So it wasn't any conspiracy land at all, even if, because there are some things obviously that we could talk about that have not been proven in court. But with our song, we were very cross the T's, dot the I's on purpose, And so we submitted an appeal. The video got back up on TikTok, but it showed me that there's still a lot of work to be done for free speech. Because yes, you're right, David. Like there's a lot of folks that, do want to ask questions and do want to speak their mind, and they should be able to, this is a free country. It's one of the wonderful things about America. Of course, we don't want, people spreading lies either. So I get both sides of the coin, but I am very grateful that we do have the different apps, the different websites. Like X specifically has really given us, a little pep in our step to be able to, share the truth.
Now looking at this and your ability to get out there and make a name for yourself on social media versus having to wait for the approval of the corporate censors that put your music on radio, what does that mean to you as an artist to be able to have a voice that you don't have to worry about being silenced or censored?
For the last couple of years, I've been writing for other artists. What's really interesting is the group of artists that I have some of my biggest cuts with as a songwriter, songs that they recorded, were artists that broke through social media, that ended up signing record deals, and now some of them are household names, and they earned their audience. They didn't ask for permission. They posted their songs on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. They grew their own following. They didn't wait for someone else to do it for them. And that was something that was very inspiring to me, because pre-pandemic, I was here in Nashville. Everything changed in the industry during the pandemic, where the pendulum really did shift. And there were other acts as well. Of course, we're friends with everyone down here, right? But I had, other friends I was writing for, that I was getting songs with, that they didn't decide to hop onto social media and share their songs. They were waiting still for the old system, for people to give them permission. And to be totally blunt with you, Sugar, a lot of those artists aren't even doing music anymore. And they were really buzzing pre-pandemic. I definitely saw, wow, the way Bailey Zimmerman, he was one of the artists that, I've had some cuts with, the way he really maneuvered, sharing his truth, his songs with audiences, that's really cool how he connects with his fans, not only in live shows, but also online. And I'll tell you what's so crazy. So last weekend, I had a full band show up in Ohio, okay? And when I tell you, it was packed to the brim with people that knew songs that are not even out yet, okay? Like because every day I'll post a verse chorus of my songs. Most of them are unreleased songs. And I noticed something, like maybe 2-3 songs in, I'm like, how are people singing the verse and chorus? Like, now they weren't singing the second verse, but they come back in on the next chorus because I never posted the second verse. And this was happening song after song. And I was like, oh my gosh, it really does translate to real world. It's not just a vanity metric of, oh, it got this many views. These are people behind the screen. So it's such an incredible tool, and it's so inspiring because, we write these songs, and if you don't watch out, they just collect digital dust, on a hard drive, and no one ever hears them.
Obviously, if you're honest these days, it creates a fair bit of controversy. Where do you see music going forward now, like we talked about, where you don't need permission from people to speak your mind?
There's going to be a little bit of everything for everyone if they want it. I think it will continue, though, to, be a tool. We're going to continue to have the tools that we want to use, and that's on the listener side as well as the artist side. Whatever you want to utilize, which is really exciting. I kind of feel like it's a little bit like the early 1900s, a little bit, with how just you think about the inventions that were happening during that time. It's just like life-changing, you know? And I think right now we're really in the technological revolution. You know, one day, years and years from now, when we're gone and they have whatever their History Channel equivalent is, they will probably have documentaries about this era and just how technology just changed everything from elections to business to the music industry. It's just changed everything.
So in Hungary, we had the last national elections in 2022.
Yeah.
And shortly afterwards, it turned out that the leftist United List and the prime minister admitted, their prime minister candidate admitted that they received massive funding from abroad. And then Hungarian secret services started to investigate this whole thing, and a very thick web of network really surfaced, and it revealed how complex this system was of influencing Hungarian elections and Hungarian politics, and how much money was really at stake. And it turned out that it was at least $10 million. The money was very difficult. It was difficult to trace the money, how it, where it actually originated from. It was possible to reveal to whom it arrived and how they were actually used, how this money was used in the campaign. But the big thing with the arrival of the Trump administration again is that they have really went to the heart and attacked this system by suspending USAID money, which was in most part misused for promoting left-wing woke ideological purposes and projects and political activism around the world, including Hungary and other US allies, NATO allies, EU countries, so well-established democracies and allies of the United States, and they use taxpayer dollars of US citizens to actually do malign foreign influence in their democratic discussions, in their elections.
Is there a program in the EU like USAID that should be looked into?
Not so much centralized like it was in the USAID, with USAID, but there are specific EU budget lines which are meant for the same kind of promotion of democracy, of human rights, etc. All these nice sounding things. But it was pretty much, when we look at who are the people who were granted money from these programs, from these grants, it was basically the same organizations that were funded under the Biden administration by USAID money.
So we did a lot of research on this, and it was interesting to see that there are a few major organizations, especially on the journalistic side, that are funded through USAID that are doing these influence campaigns, but it's also think tanks that are funded. Do you find, what types of organizations? You mentioned a few that are like activists or political activists. I mean, are you seeing it here in Hungary on a journalistic perspective or any other different?
Yeah, we see a lot of media funding.
Mm-hmm.
We see funding of podcasts. It's pretty much the democratic actors acting in other elections in other countries as if it was their own, and intervening as much as they can. The thing is, we really need to look at also the organizations. So these organizations are constantly suing Hungary in courts because we do not allow illegal immigrants into the country, and those who are caught, they're being deported immediately, and they don't like that. They go to the European Parliament and EU institutions to complain about what the Hungarian government is doing, and that what the Hungarian government is actually doing is implementing policy which has the support of the majority of Hungarians. So they're actually using foreign money to go then to international fora and institutions, badmouth the Hungarian government, and try to impose from abroad, from international organizations, that the Hungarian government and parliament do this, amend this law, repeal that law, and for the effect of allowing illegal immigrants, allowing woke ideology into the country, and of course providing support and the weapons to Ukraine.
Moving forward, are you seeing that in individual countries, that there's going to be more of a coalition to be able to fight against foreign interference, or to fight against like maybe big things that parties that not necessarily agree on everything would agree on that?
Well, we are agreeing on a lot of issues on fighting against globalist policies, like immigration, like an overzealous green policy and green measures, like gender ideology. The issue is, until we don't actually make it into government coalitions in different European countries, you can't change this system just from Brussels, just from European elections. You need to win at national elections. You need to go into government to be actually have an impact also at what's going on at EU level. And now that in the US there's a change of heart and the Trump administration won't tolerate auto filtering of content on social media platforms anymore, Facebook, X no longer do this on their platforms, or less and less. But the EU still imposes these very same platforms of continuing censorship and filtering of content in European countries. So US audiences might be like, yeah, there's change, there's USAID being shut down, auto filtering is being repealed, etc., but not in Europe.
So you're building your own Dodge here in Europe?
We're not there yet, but we're fighting individually as members of European Parliament. We're fighting, we have the third largest group in the European Parliament called the Patriots for Europe group. That's where the staunchest patriots and conservatives are at European level. So we are also reaching out to American counterparts, to the Trump administration, to Republicans in Congress to see what we can do, because this globalist left-wing network is transatlantic. You can't just defeat the Hydra just by cutting off one head and just by cutting off USAID funding. The system, the network still exists. The EU can come in and fill the financing gap. That's why we want to work with Americans. That's why we want to work with conservatives in America to expose this network, because that's already a big step, and then see what we can do to really totally destroy this network.
So one last question, just to tie it back. There's actually been reports that there was money that's been funneled from the EU into the US, actually, to influence our elections as well. Have you seen that? Have you been able to find any of the traces of it? Because I know that several times they were doing this with the Kamala campaign, and it actually was found that the UK, through some of their NGOs, were actually sending operatives to the US to help with them.
Yeah, I saw that piece of news as well. Look, again, if the Trump administration wants to look into this, if Republicans in the US want to look into this, Patriots will be partners ready to cooperate.
Hi, I'm Buzz, decentralized finance and AI founder. AI is continuing to dominate tech headlines with new landmark deals and launches. Last week, OpenAI acquired I.O., Johnny Ives' AI hardware startup, for $6.5 billion in an all-stock deal. Ives spent the majority of his career at Apple and was its chief design officer when he left in 2019. The acquisition merges a team of 59 engineers, led by Ives and ex-Apple designers, with OpenAI's team, and their goal? To develop screenless AI devices by 2026. This has led to speculation on X. What type of hardware will OpenAI put out? Well, they're keeping that information pretty close to the chest, for now. And in the midst of that headline, Anthropic flew under the radar when they launched Claude 4, and it's actually been scoring as the top coding model in the market. The race with AI companies around the world is on, and my advice, as always, is to start using AI in your daily workflow or get left behind. This is Buzz, and this is your 69 seconds within 69 minutes.
Next, an exclusive inside America's border crisis. Veteran journalist Eric Bolling embedded with ICE on a high-stakes raid targeting Tren de Agua, a violent transnational gang spreading across the US. 2 suspects captured, 1 accused of murder. This isn't about politics. It's about killers slipping through the cracks and agents risking everything to stop them. For the first time, Eric takes you inside the raid, step by step, moment by moment. Like always here, it's raw and unfiltered.
Early morning hours, just days ago, we were granted rare access to a major bust of some real bad hombres, Tren de Agua gangbangers.
Hi, folks. We're going out on 2 buses, 2 Tren de Agua members, one for murder. So they're going to deport both of these people. Law enforcement is here, present. This is what we voted for. This is what we paid for. This is what we wanted. And look at this, 22 different officers, 7 different law enforcement agencies. This is legit. We're vested up. This could get crazy. Who knows?
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, was the lead, but there were 7 agencies present, including the FBI, the DEA, HSI, federal marshals, and Florida Highway Patrol, among others. We blurred the faces to protect the identities of the officers. Tren de la Agua is known to use highly sophisticated facial recognition technology to identify our officers and rain down terror on them and their families. In the following video compilation, you will see these thugs get arrested and hauled off to ICE detention centers and then on their way to deportation. These raids are highly planned, highly successful, very dangerous.
We're sitting here, we're waiting. We got to the location, the pre-dawn location. 22 law enforcement officers from 7 or 8 different agencies are involved. A couple of bad guys, 2 separate raids, busts, removals, I guess we'll call it. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so thank you. So these are targeted enforcement actions. So this particular individual that we are looking to target is a suspected TDA member. He has involvement in aggravated assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. He also has aggravated battery, bodily harm charges. Right now we're just setting up. We're at the location where the target may be. Our team leads are on this. They're situated where hopefully this target will, they've done their homework. So the agents, the officers have done their homework. So they've been tracking his patterns.
These raids are highly planned, highly successful, very dangerous, and ultimately make our streets safer for law-abiding citizens. This day, 2 TDA gangbangers would be busted. In addition to being illegal aliens, they're wanted for assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to kill, murder, and money laundering.
He commanded fleets, oversaw Israel's nuclear program, spent decades studying threats the West ignored. Rear Admiral Shahul Karev isn't just a sailor, he's a strategist. One of the first to warn, China isn't coming, China is already here. Not in theory, in ports, infrastructure, right next to US warships and vital trade routes. Years ago, he warned letting China run Haifa port was a mistake. He was ignored. Now that port is not only open, it's expanding. So we ask, why is a key US ally helping China tighten its grip? What does Beijing want in the region? And is it too late to stop it? This isn't just about Israel. It's about global power and the cost of ignoring the threat. It is a wake-up call.
You became aware of something well before many other people. In fact, many people still refuse to accept it. And this is the rising / already here threat of the Communist Party in China. When did you cotton on that their intentions were not noble?
I think that there were two signs. When I was within the defense establishment, I think in the 2000, there was the Falcon air reconnaissance plane that China want to get from us because of the technology. The US objected it, and it was quite a scandal in Israel because Chinese insisted getting the money. And then another episode with what they call the Harpy. Harpy is a UAV that the Israeli aircraft industry also exported to China. It was not according to the US regulation, and it was also a scandal in Israel. But later, when I finished my career in the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission, I became aware of what is happening with the, let's say, port, harbor, Bay of Haifa port that they assigned to operate this port for 25 years. Actually, it was not an, let's say, insight that I got it by myself, but we had a group from Hudson Institute, and we start to evaluate what does it mean Chinese operating Bayport in Haifa, which is a national infrastructure. And we started to understand what are the implications of such an event and become very much aware of it and try to, let's say, give such kind of recommendation to our government, which we didn't succeed at that time. It was 2015 or 2016.
For those who don't understand what this means, can you explain to us why this is so dangerous, not just for Israel, but for your allies, your Western allies, and for the world at large?
Actually, we come to this conclusion when we discuss it with the ex-chief of naval operation, U.S. naval operation, Admiral Gary Raffed. And he was in this workshop very cooperative, and he is pro-Israeli. And he asked the question why we can't transfer the Haifa port to be the home port for the Sixth Fleet. So I asked him, and if by the Haifa port there is a Chinese-operated port for several years, do you still maintain such a recommendation? And he was shocked, and I asked him why, and he mentioned, look, it's not only a port. The port is connected to the port's communication system, so they have an access to all these details. If we will anchor in Haifa port, they will have an access to our ships. They can see how they are doing the maintenance. They can approach people from the ships who are coming to the shore. So he started to mention all these things because some people in Israel mention you are ridiculous. If you are speaking about reconnaissance from the Carmel Mountain, everybody can see what is happening, but they don't understand what are the other dimension of operating the Bayport in Haifa.
You look at a map, and if you were to mark on that world map where Chinese government run / owned, and let's be honest, any company, if required, has to pass on information to the Chinese government. They have put themselves everywhere. They are everywhere, and this is on purpose. And an American Rear Admiral has spoken about the fact that he thinks they will try to take back Taiwan within this decade. World War III could erupt if China attempts to do that. And they have support and bases and infrastructure all over the world. This could be fatal.
It would be a problem. And I think that once Israel has an illusion that it can maintain relationship with the US and China as well. Currently, look what happened when the Houthi blockade the Bab el-Mandeb. Speaking about Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, they should be the first one to fight this blockade. They didn't do it. They have a base in Djibouti. From this base, they can operate ships, boats, to do such a things. They didn't do it. they prefer to pay ransom to the Houthis that will allow them to keep navigating in the Red Sea. So when you are looking at China and speaking about Belt and Road Initiative and where they would like to have some ports, I think it should give a concern, especially to the West. And we in Israel should be more cautious because China is a very big trade partner of Israel, and we need it. I think that we, the West, if I can say the West, should be aware about it. I think that in Australia, there is a lesson learned in Darwin. It's not only Darwin. When they have a foothold in this place, they can give money to people, they can be elected to the parliament, and such an influence can be expanded very much.
Hi, I'm Mary Delgado, and this is your 69 Seconds Crypto News on 69X Minutes. I think the biggest crypto news this week centered around the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, held on May 27th through the 29th. There was over 35,000 attendees. Vice President J.D. Vance's electrifying keynote, joined by crypto giants like Michael Saylor and Donald Trump Jr., hyped the Genius Act to revolutionize stablecoin regulation. Bitcoin hit an all-time high, driven by surging institutional demand and pro-crypto policies. Now, GameStop made waves with a 512 million Bitcoin buy led by CEO Ryan Cohen's bold treasury strategy, while Trump media's rumored 2.5 billion Bitcoin purchase sparked frenzy, eyeing a massive corporate treasury. BlackRock's potential 10% stake in Circle's IPO sent shockwaves. The expo hall buzzed with DeFi innovations and networking. Bitcoin enthusiasts are already buzzing for next year's Las Vegas conference. I'm Mary Delgado for 69 Seconds on 69X Minutes.
What really brought my attention to the EU is what happened in Romania, which was just mind-boggling to me. I was concerned about the censorship in the UK, which we'll talk about. But what happened in Romania was, for me, just another level. For them to just blatantly cancel an election. When I started looking into it, the same thing is happening across the EU, in Austria, in the Netherlands, with the cordon sanitaire, and in Germany, the isolationism against anyone that's anti-establishment. So as you've been a minister for over 10 years now, I've been a prime minister as well. What's your take on all this? How concerning is it? Because I don't want to ring the alarm.
It is very concerning. And I was in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, and there's a massive sign saying democracy, and you think, well, this is like 1984. It's the opposite of democracy. What the European Commission tries to do, they're fundamentally anti-democratic, and there is an attempt to suppress what is the popular will right across Europe, and we see that in the UK. The attempts to subvert Brexit, the experience I had of trying to implement policies that people support and being defied by the establishment, and the establishment turning out to be more powerful. And we're just seeing more and more overt attempts by the left to stop views they don't like, people they don't like, ideas they don't like, ever seeing the light of day. And they're not just fighting through the ballot box, they're fighting through lawfare. They're fighting through suppressing free speech, and we have a big problem with that in Britain. And they're actively involving themselves in elections. So Marine Le Pen being banned from running in France, the AfD being designated as an extremist organisation. I think all of this is very, very dangerous because people's feelings aren't going away. And in Britain, people have voted for change 3 times. They voted for change in 2016 with Brexit, again with Boris in 2019, again, unbelievably, for Keir Starmer in 2024. But the problem is the same people are still in charge. So nothing actually changes. We still have the same issues in our country. And I think that is what is happening across Europe.
The extremist label. In Germany, they called AfD first, they called them probationary extremists. That was the first term a few years ago. Then it moved to I think he's like probable extremist or something like that, suspected extremist. And then now it's a few weeks ago it moved to certified extremists. The concerning thing is that
this is people trying to define the guardrails of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. You know, they do it on economic policy, migration policy, climate change policy. So the BBC, for example, which is another institution in Britain that's been captured, you know, they say that it's not acceptable to be skeptical about climate change. That's just not an acceptable view. So they're not going to provide balance on it. They're not going to have one side of the argument and the other side of the argument, because that's settled. And anybody who doesn't agree with that is an extremist. And that is the way that the narrative is managed. And that is what has been going on. And what I think you're seeing, and this is what you've seen in America with Trump, is a massive frustration from the majority of the population about being told stuff that isn't true and having a managed narrative.
But how did we get here? And I'll give you some examples, and maybe for the audience. You know, Lucy, she was sentenced to almost 3 years for saying mass deportation now, set fire to all these effing hotels full of BS for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. It's an appalling post. But you go to jail for 3 years for a post. And the list goes on. Here is someone...
And by the way, people are not being put in jail for things like viewing child pornography. They don't get a jail sentence for that.
They actually don't... No, you don't get sentenced to jail if you watch child porn?
Correct. So Hugh Edwards, the newsreader who was found to have done that, did not go to jail.
And he was found guilty?
Yeah.
And Lucy went to jail for that tweet?
Yeah.
How did we get here?
Well, it's a very... I talked about what Blair did to undermine the justice system and undermine traditional British liberties by bringing in things like the Human Rights Act. So what's happened is we've created a system where the human rights of criminals appear to be more important than the human rights of law-abiding Britons. And that was created by Blair. And of course, Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer, and he was part of that development of the culture that we've seen. So these can all be traced back. This can all be traced back to what the Blair government did. And the big mistake of the Conservatives was not reversing that.
But then what would be a solution to this? Because it feels like it's just been so ingrained.
Well, the solution is pretty obvious. You've got to repeal the Human Rights Act. You've got to get rid of the Supreme Court. You've got to restore accountability to the judiciary. You need to appoint police chiefs who are actually responsive to Parliament. That's what you've got to do. Because what we've got at present is a load of institutions in Britain that have been captured by ideology that is just antithetical to our whole way of life. You know, there has to be big change. And this is what people want to see happening.
What happens when speaking the truth gets you banned? Alex Craner isn't some fringe conspiracy theorist. He's a former hedge fund analyst who went deep inside the system, then blew the whistle in his book, The Grand Deception. He exposes secret financial networks and how Western elites use censorship, legal threats, and big tech to silence anyone who challenges their hold on money, influence, and war. From forgotten US-Russia alliances to the rise of BRICS, challenging the dollar's dominance, Alex's story goes beyond finance. It's a fight for free speech and the future of global power. We sat down with Alex to find out what got him banned, why dissent is disappearing, and what it means, well, for all of us.
I became aware of certain power networks in the world who appeared to be very keen on pushing us into World War III between Western powers and Russia. My book on geopolitics was titled The Grand Deception, and it was published in 2017. It was banned 6 weeks after publishing. Then We republished it with a different publisher about 9-10 months later, changed the title, double-checked every claim made in the book, and it got banned after 5 weeks again. So I became familiar a little bit with the freedom of expression in the free West, in the free world. So I continued to speak out and write on the subject of war and peace, geopolitical relations between the East and the West, to a lesser extent military matters.
I'm curious, why do you think it was banned twice? What was specifically, was there any reasons given for that?
Well, you know, you can buy it from the website of its publisher.
Right. But it can't buy it from the...
But you can't buy it from Amazon, you can't buy it from any bookstore. You know, basically Amazon got a letter from a person who acted in capacity of Bill Browder's lawyer, but he was in fact one of the swamp creatures of Washington, D.C. His name is Jonathan Weiner. He basically wrote to Amazon that the book might have defamatory content, and no questions asked, Amazon just deleted the whole thing. So Bill Browder, for people who, you know, it's not exactly a household name, so for people who don't know, he used to be the manager of the largest foreign-owned hedge fund, investment fund in Russia during the 1990s. And so Bill Browder was one of the people who made a fortune for himself and his investors in Russia. It was a process that I would tag as the largest pirate raid ever orchestrated in the history of mankind. He published a book called Red Notice, and that turned out to be a bestseller. I read the book, and because I was already aware of the background of that story, I realized that the story was untrue. Except it was exactly the narrative that was used in 2012 to lobby the Magnitsky Act through US Congress. It set Russia and the United States on a collision course. But then, you know, as I was researching some of the claims that Browder himself makes, I realized that there was a much, much broader and much deeper context to the events that transpired almost throughout the 1800s, throughout the 19th century. The United States and Russia used to be very, very close allies and friends. And that alliance was so important in the political life of the United States that it was considered to be part of the folklore of the American culture, this friendship with Russia. But then it all just disappears. It got scrubbed from history, and I wondered why or how that could even happen. So I dug up a lot of context to try to explain all that and why things were done that way and where they might be leading us in the near future. So I think that I probably ended up exposing some of the things that the powers that be would prefer people didn't know. And then as a result, I guess my book got banned.
Milei liberates Argentine savings. President Milei has dismantled Argentina's tight financial controls, easing restrictions on savings and taxes to restore economic liberty. For decades, oppressive regulations and aggressive enforcement by ARCA, Argentine's tax agency, pushed more than 40% of the economy into informality. ARCA's Soviet-style monitoring forced even convenience stores to report all transactions, driving Argentines to hide an estimated 200 to 400 billion in undeclared US dollars under their mattresses or foreign accounts. Milei's reforms aim to bring these funds back into the formal economy, increasing loan availability and fostering growth. By ending the state's chokehold, Argentines can now spend their hard-earned money freely. This is Argentina's Milei News, and that's your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Europe is a continent of different nations with different history, different language, different civilization, different geography. And the question for them always, it's a historical question. How do we work together? And how we provide peace and prosperity for our nations? And after the Second World War, the idea behind the European Union, the European integration itself, was exactly this. Like, let's create a platform on which we can work together and provide peace and economic prosperity for our nations.
Would you agree that the European Union started with good intentions, but there's systemic flaws?
Yeah, I would agree with you. So, and it still has some very good elements, like we are a small country with a small market, but the Hungarian economy is doing great, and we can sell our products in other European markets. So it's a value. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was impossible for the Hungarians to travel abroad. Even to Vienna, which is the neighboring capital. Now you can travel freely. So there are some positive elements, but my concern and our concern is that if we turn the European Union into a political project, a liberal, progressive, transnational project, then it can cause a mass destruction on these positive achievements as well. So this is why we are saying that we want to change the European Union and save the positive achievements of the European integration. If it remains in the hand of the liberals, then 10, 20, 30 years time, the question is whether the European Union as such can survive this hijacking from the liberals.
And they're trying again to strip the Prime Minister from his voting rights as well. But
of course, they are openly talking about it. You know, if you are not supporting the war, and their war coalition, then you don't have the right to vote, and you don't have to say your opinion. It's insane. I mean,
are you worried that it could work, or it's just too much opposition?
No,
it seems very far-fetched.
No. It's I think it's not going to happen, but
Slovakia.
Yeah. There are some countries, and we are strong. We have allies. We are ready to defend ourselves, but we never forget that this is their intention. And the Hungarian people are very much upset because of that. So they like the idea of European Union, but they dislike the idea that decisions are made by Brussels and it's dictated what has to be done. So this is why we turn every time to the people. Now there is a national referendum on the EU-Ukraine accession. And we ask the people and we tell them, you know, it's a simplification issue. It's a big strategic decision. It will have consequences. Some of them are saying that it will have positive consequences. We are more concerned. We think that it would have negative consequences. So it's up to you to decide. And I think they will make a decision whether they support Ukraine EU accession or not. And the government will represent that opinion on the European level.
That's how democracy should work.
That's how democracy.
Whether you like the decision or not.
Yes, and this is a behavior which is treated as radical and non-acceptable on the European level.
What are your thoughts on the latest developments? Because Prime Minister Orban is, he jokingly said a lot of the things he's been saying for years and he's been kind of doing for years. Trying to maintain that balance between Russia and Europe and not alienate Russia completely. Trying to end the war early. Essentially what Trump is doing now for the last few months. Now, and the Prime Minister joked how Trump is taking all the credit. But what is your take and the Prime Minister's take on the latest developments in Ukraine? Is that just part of the process? Or are you a bit surprised, especially by what happened 2-3 days ago?
No, we are not surprised because when last year, summertime, my Prime Minister made a peace mission. He went to Kiev, then to Moscow, then to Beijing. And then he wrote a report and he wrote down that the problem is that both sides are convinced that they have to keep fighting. So they don't want to stop fighting. So for For this, we need neutral outside mediators who are not part of the conflict but trying to convince both parties to make an agreement. And he was saying that the United States will vote for Trump, and Trump will try to be this neutral outside mediator. So he was trying to warn the European Union to act before it happens, but they rejected it, and it exactly happened what was told by the Prime Minister. And I think President Trump, what he is trying to do now is exactly this. And it's not going to be easy, like peace cannot come from one day. So first, like what he did, restored communication channels and organized high-level discussions between Ukrainians and Russians. It didn't happen in the last 3 years. Without communication, it's impossible to achieve something. There was a big prisoners exchange. So there are some tiny little steps. And what we're doing in Hungary is we're trying to support the Americans and trying to convince the Europeans not go against the Americans. Because what the Europeans are doing now is that they want to, they are going against the European plans. They are supporting the Ukrainian plan to continue the fight. They are not supporting the American plan to stop the fight. And I think it's a very complicated diplomatic effort. And if somebody is capable of doing it, then it's Trump.
Now it's time for my take. When people tell us who they are, why don't we believe them? Especially when the message they're delivering is not the one we want to hear. It makes it all the less likely they're lying, doesn't it? Today we showed you just how big the Chinese Communist Party's global infiltration has become. We've shown you before. And why that should scare every single person who believes in the values of democracy, peace and prosperity. Every single day we see and hear about another way in which this regime has embedded itself in a foreign country. And it shouldn't surprise anyone. They've been doing it boldly and saying it loudly for years. If this had been a subtle shift or something under the radar, the West and Co could be forgiven for failing to act. But it's been the complete opposite. Not only has the rest of the world refused to stand up to this threat, they have so far willingly aided and abetted the process. It's crazy. Pouring billions into the very economy that makes no secret of its intentions. And those intentions are to destroy. President Xi Jinping has said publicly many times, he wants Taiwan and for China to sit at the very top of the world order. And the military might he's been building up over the past decade tells you that he's not planning on achieving it through diplomacy. Yet still, for the most part, the rest of the world does nothing. US President Donald Trump was the first in a long time to do something meaningful. The rhetoric surrounding tariffs signalled to the CCP that America wasn't just going to roll over. But after 4 years of weak leadership, bad decisions and fumbling foreign policy, the US can't stand alone against this threat. Not now anyways. And nor should they have to. Every nation who values the current world order and fears the alternative must do their part immediately. And it might already be too late in many ways, but it definitely will be soon. My dad, a former Major General and Senator, used to always say, you can't fight a war you don't understand. The upside here, the battle they want and are preparing for, has been heavily documented in speeches, Parliament and government-controlled media. A good start to counter this offensive would be to read it. Well, that's it for 69X Minutes, presented by Mario Nafal. I'm Erin Molan. Thank you so much for joining us. No spin, no censorship, just the truth. We'll see you next time.